spring. I didn't tell anyone about the suspension. When Henry texted me a few days later asking why I wasn't in school, I told him I had strep throat. That's what we told everyone. It turns out 2-week suspension isn't so bad, by the way. I spent most of the time at home watching SpongeBob Returns and playing Knights of the Old Republic. I was supposed to keep up on my schoolwork, though it's not like I totally got to goof off. Miss Rubin dropped by my apartment one afternoon with all my locker stuff, my textbook, my loose leaf book, and all the assignments I would need to make up. And there was a lot. Everything went really well with social studies and English, but I had so much trouble doing the math homework that Mom had to get me a math tutor. Despite all that time off, I really was excited about going back. Or at least I thought I was. The night before my first day back, I had one of my nightmares again. Only this time, it wasn't me who looked like Auggie. It was everyone else. I should have taken this as a premonition. When I got back to school, as soon as I arrived, I could tell something was up. Something was different. The first thing I noticed is that no one was really excited about seeing me again. I mean, people said hello and asked how I was feeling, but no one was like, dude, I missed you. I would have thought Miles and Henry would be like that. But they weren't. In fact, at lunchtime, they didn't even sit at our usual table. They sat with Amos. So I had to take my tray and find a place to squeeze in at Amos's table, which was kind of humiliating. Then I overheard the three of them talking about hanging out at the playground after school and shooting hoops, but no one asked me to come. The thing that was weirdest of all, though, was that everyone was being really nice to Auggie. Like, ridiculously nice. It was like I had entered the portal to a different dimension, an alternate universe in which Auggie and I had changed places. Suddenly, he was the popular one and I was the outsider. Right after last period, I pulled Henry over to talk to him. Yo, dude, why is everyone being so nice to the freak all of a sudden? I asked. Oh, said Henry, looking around kind of nervously. Yeah, well, people don't really call him that anymore. And then he told me about all the stuff that had gone down at the nature retreat. Basically, what had happened was that Auggie and Jack got picked on by some 7th grade bullies from another school. Henry, Miles, and Amos had rescued them, got into a fight with the bullies, like with real punches flying, and then they all escaped through the corn maze. It sounded really exciting, and as he was telling me, I got mad all over again that Mr. Tushman had made me miss it. Oh man, I said excitedly. I wish I would have been there. I totally would have creamed those jerks. Wait, which jerks? The 7th graders. Really? He looked puzzled, though Henry always looked a little puzzled, because I don't know, Julian, I kind of think that if you would have been there, we might not have rescued them at all. You probably would have been cheering for the 7th graders. I looked at him like he was an idiot. No, I wouldn't, I said. Seriously? He said, giving me a look. No, I said. Okay, he answered, shrugging. Yo, Henry, are you coming? Amos called out from down the hallway. Look, I gotta go, said Henry. Wait, I said. Gotta go. Want to hang out tomorrow after school? Not sure, he answered, backing away. Text me tonight and we'll see. As I watched him jog away, I had this terrible feeling in the pit of my stomach. Did he really think I was that awful that I would have been rooting for some 7th graders while they were beating Auggie up? Is that what other people think? That I would have been that much of a dirtwad? Look, I'm the first one to say that I don't like Auggie Pullman, but I would never want to see him get beat up or anything. I mean, come on, I'm not a psycho. It's really annoyed me that that's what people thought of me. I text Henry later on, yo, by the way, I would never have just stood by and let those creeps beat Auggie and Jack up. But he never texted me back. Mr. Tushman. That last month in school was awful. It's not like anyone was out and out mean to me, but I felt iced out by Amos and Henry and Miles. I just didn't feel popular anymore. No one really ever laughed at my jokes. No one wanted to hang out with me. I felt like I could disappear from the school and nobody would miss me. Meanwhile, Auggie was walking down the hallway like some cool dude getting high-fived by all the jocks in the upper grade. Whatever. Mr. Tushman called me into his office one day. How's it going, Julian? He asked me. Fine. Did you ever write that apology letter I'd asked you to write? My dad says I'm leaving the school so I don't have to write anything. I answered. Oh, he said, nodding. I guess I was hoping you'd want to write one on your own. Why? I said, everyone thinks I'm this big dirt bag anyway. What in the heck is writing a letter going to accomplish? Julian, look, I know everyone thinks I'm this unfeeling kid who doesn't feel remorse, I said, using air quotes. Julian, said Mr. Tushman, no one... Suddenly I felt like I was going to cry. So I just interrupted him. I'm really late for class and I don't want to get in trouble, so can I please go? Mr. Tushman looked sad. He nodded. Then I left his office without looking back. A few days later, we received an official notice from the school telling us that they had withdrawn their invitation to enroll in the fall. I didn't think it mattered since Dad had told them we weren't coming back anyway. But we still hadn't heard from the other schools I had applied to, and if I didn't get into any of them, we had planned on going back to Beecher Prep. But now that was impossible. Mom and Dad were furious at the school. Like crazy mad. Mostly because they had already paid the tuition for next year in advance, and the school wasn't planning on returning the money. So that's the thing about private school. They can kick you out for any reason. Luckily, a few days later, we did find out that I'd gotten into my first choice private school not far from where I lived. I'd have to wear a uniform, but that was okay. Better than having to go to Beecher Prep every day. Needless to say, we skipped the graduation ceremony at the end of the year. So now we are to the part in the book where it is after the graduation ceremony. So now we are going to continue to hear from Julian, but it's actually going to take place in the summertime. So it says, there is only tears such as men use. Now I know thou art a man, and a man's cub no longer. The jungle is shut indeed to thee henceforward. Let them fall, Mowgli. They are only tears. And, oh, the wild the wind is blowing, through the graves the wind is blowing. Freedom soon will come, then will come from the shadows. Summer vacation. My parents and I went to Paris in June. The original plan was that we would return to New York in July since I was supposed to go to a rock and roll camp with Henry and Miles. But after everything that happened, I didn't want to do that anymore. My parents decided to let me stay with my grandmother for the rest of the summer. Usually, I hate staying with Grandmere, but I was okay about it this time. I knew that my parents went home, I could spend the rest of the day in my pajamas playing Halo, and Grandmere wouldn't care in the least. I could pretty much do whatever I wanted. Grandmere wasn't exactly the typical grandma type. No baking cookies for Grandmere. No knitting sweaters. She was, as Dad would say, something of a character. Even though she was in her 80s, she dressed like a fashion model. Super glamorous, lots of makeup and perfume, high heels. She never woke up until 2 in the afternoon, and then she'd take at least 2 hours to get dressed. Once she was up, she would take me out shopping or go to a museum or a fancy restaurant. She wasn't into doing kids stuff, if you know what I mean. She'd never sit through a PG movie with me, for instance, so I ended up seeing a lot of movies that were totally age inappropriate. Mom, I knew, would go completely ballistic if she got wind of some of the movies Grandmere took me to see. But Grandmere was French and was always saying my parents were too American anyway. Grandmere also didn't talk to me like I was a little kid. Even when I was younger, she never used baby words or talked to me the way grown-ups usually talk to little kids. She used real words to describe everything. Like if I were to say, J-Flox, Puppy, I don't know, meaning I want to go pee-pee, she would say, you need to urinate, go to the lavatory. And she cussed sometimes too. Boy, she could cuss. And if I didn't know what a cuss word meant, all I had to do was ask her and she would explain it to me in detail. I can't even tell you some of the words she explained to me. Anyway, I was glad to be away from New York City for the whole summer. I was hoping that I would get all of those kids out of my head. Auggie, Jack, Summer, Henry, Miles, all of them. If I never saw any of those kids again, I would be the happiest kid in Paris. Mr. Brown. The only thing I was a little bummed about is that I never got to say goodbye to any of my teachers at Beecher Prep. I really liked some of them. Mr. Brown, my English teacher, was probably my favorite teacher of all time. He had always been really nice to me. I loved writing, and he was really complimentary about it. And I never got to tell him I wasn't coming back to Beecher Prep. At the beginning of the year, Mr. Brown had told all of us that he wanted us to send him one of our own precepts over the summer. So one afternoon while Grandma was sleeping, I started thinking about sending him a precept from Paris. I went to one of the tourist shops down the block and I bought a postcard of a gargoyle, one of those at the top of Notre Dame. The first thing I thought when I saw it was that it reminded me of Auggie, and I thought, oh, why am I still thinking about him? Why do I still see his face wherever I go? I can't wait to start over. And that is when it hit me, my precept. I wrote it down really quickly. Sometimes it's good to start over. There. Perfect. I loved it. I got Mr. Brown's address from his teacher page on Beecher Prep website and dropped it in the mail that same day. But then after I sent it, I realized he wasn't going to understand what it meant. Not really. He didn't have the whole background story about why I was so happy to be leaving Beecher Prep and starting over somewhere new. So I decided to write him an email to tell him everything that had happened last year. I mean, not everything. Dad had specifically told me not to tell anyone at the school about the mean stuff I did to Auggie for legal reasons. But I wanted Mr. Brown to know enough so that he would understand my precept. I also wanted him to know that I thought he was a great teacher. Mom had told everyone that I wasn't going back to Beecher Prep because we were unhappy with the academics and the teachers. I felt kind of bad about that because I didn't want Mr. Brown to think I was unhappy with him. So anyway, I decided to send Mr. Brown an email. So this is to T. Brown from Julian Albans, and it says, my precept. Hi, Mr. Brown. I sent you my precept in the mail. Sometimes it's good to start over. It's on a postcard of a gargoyle. I wrote this precept because I'm going to a new school in September. I ended up hating Beecher Prep. I didn't like the students, but I did like the teachers. I thought your class was great, so don't take my not going back personally. I don't know if you know the whole long story, but basically the reason I'm not going to Beecher Prep is, well, not to name names, but there was one student I really didn't get along with. Actually, it was two students. You can probably guess who they are because one of them punched me in the mouth. Anyway, these kids were not my favorite people in the world. We started writing mean notes to each other. I repeat, each other. It was a two-way street. But I'm the one who got in trouble for it. Just me. It was so unfair. The truth is, Mr. Tushman had it in for me because my mom was trying to get him fired. Anyway, long story short, I got suspended for 2 weeks for writing the notes. No one knows this, though. It's a secret, so please don't tell anyone. The school said it has a zero-tolerance policy against bullying, but I don't think what I was doing was bullying. My parents got so mad at the school, they decided to enroll me in a different school next year. So yeah, that's the story. I really wish that student had never come to Beecher Prep. My whole year would have been so much better. I hated having to be in his class. He gave me nightmares. I would still be going to Beecher Prep if he hadn't been there. I'm so bummed. I really liked your class, though. You were a great teacher. I wanted to let you know. I thought it was good that I had it named names, but figured he'd know who I was talking about. I really didn't expect to hear back from him, but the very next day when I checked my inbox, there was an email from Mr. Brown. I was so excited. Well, his email wasn't so nice, so let's see what Mr. Brown had to say. Hi, Julian. Thanks so much for your email. I'm looking forward to getting the gargoyle postcard. I'm sorry to hear you won't be coming back to Beecher Prep. I always thought you were a great student and a gifted writer. By the way, I love your precept. I agree. Sometimes it's good to start over. A fresh start gives us the chance to reflect on the past, weigh the things we've done, and apply what we've learned from those things to the future. If we don't examine the past, we don't learn from it. As for the kids you don't like, I do think I know who you're talking about. I'm sorry the year didn't turn out to be a happy one for you, but I hope you take a little time to ask yourself why. Things that happen to us, even the bad stuff, can often teach us a little bit about ourselves. Do you ever wonder why you had such a hard time with these two students? Was it perhaps their friendship that had bothered you? Were you troubled by Auggie's physical appearance? You mentioned that you started having nightmares. Did you ever consider that maybe you were just a little afraid of Auggie, Julian? Sometimes fear can make even the nicest kids do and say things they wouldn't ordinarily say or do. Perhaps you should explore those feelings further. In any case, I wish you the best in your new school, Julian. You're a good kid, a natural leader. Just remember to use your leadership for good, huh? Don't forget, always choose kind. I don't know why, but I was so happy to get that email from Mr. Brown. I knew he would be understanding. I was so tired of everyone thinking I was this demon kid, or this demon child, It was obvious that Mr. Brown knew I wasn't. I reread his email like 10 times. I was smiling from ear to ear. So, Grandmere asked me. She had just woken up and was having her breakfast. A croissant, a cafe au latte, delivered from downstairs. I haven't seen you this happy all summer long. What is it that you're reading, mon cher? Oh, I got an email from one of my teachers, I answered, Mr. Brown. From your old school, she asked. I thought they were all bad, those teachers. I thought it was good riddance to all of them. Grandmere had a thick French accent that was hard to understand sometimes. What? Good riddance, she repeated. Never mind, I thought the teachers were all stupid. The way she pronounced stupid was funny, like stupid. Not at all. Not all, not Mr. Brown, I answered. So, what did he write to make you so happy? Oh, nothing much, I said. It's just, I thought everyone hated me, but now I know Mr. Brown doesn't. Grandmere looked at me. Why would everyone hate you, Julian? She asked. You are such a good boy. I don't know, I answered. Read me the email, she said. No, Grandmere, I started to say. Read, she commanded, pointing her finger at the screen. So I read Mr. Brown's letter aloud to her. Now, Grandmere knew a little bit about what had happened at Beecher Prep, but I don't think she knew the whole story. I think Mom and Dad told her the version of the story they told everyone else, with maybe a few more details. Grandmere knew there were a couple of kids who had made my life miserable, for instance, but she didn't know the specifics. She knew I'd gotten punched in the mouth, but she didn't know why. If anything, Grandmere probably assumed I had gotten bullied, and that's why I was leaving the school. So there were parts of Mr. Brown's emails she really didn't understand. What does he mean? She said, squinting as she tried to read off the screen. Augie's physical appearance. Que sister. One of the kids that I didn't like, Auggie, had this awful facial deformity. I answered, it was really bad. He looked like a gargoyle. Julian, she said, that's not very nice. Sorry, and this boy, he was not symphonique, she said innocently. He's not nice to you? Was he a bully? I thought about that. No, he wasn't a bully. So why did you not like him? I shrugged. I don't know. He just got on my nerves. What do you mean you don't know? She answered quickly. Your parents told me you were leaving this school because some bullies. No? You got punched in the face. No? Well, yeah, I got punched in the face, but not by the deformed kid. By his friend. Ah, so his friend was the bully. No, not exactly, I said. I can't say they were bullies, Grandmere. It's not like that. We just didn't get along, that's all. We hated each other. It's kind of hard to explain. You kind of had to be there. Here, let me show you what he looks like. Then maybe you'll understand a little better. Not to sound mean, but it was really hard having to look at him every day. He gave me nightmares. I logged onto Facebook and found our class picture and zoomed in on Augie's face so she could see. She put our glasses on to look at it and spent a long time studying his face on the computer screen. I thought she would react the way Mom had reacted when she first saw Auggie, but she didn't. She just nodded to herself, and then she closed the laptop. Pretty bad, huh? I said to her. She looked at me. Julian, she said, I think maybe your teacher is right. I think you were afraid of this boy. What? No way, I answered. I'm not afraid of Auggie. I didn't like him. In fact, I kind of hated him, but not because I was afraid of him. Sometimes we hate the things we are afraid of, she said. I made a face like she was talking crazy. She shook my hand. I know what it is like to be afraid, Julian, she said, holding up her finger to her face. There was a little boy that I was afraid of when I was a little girl. Let me guess, I answered, sounding bored. I bet he looked just like Auggie. Grandmere shook her head. No, his face was fine. So why were you afraid of him? I asked. I tried to make my voice sound as disinterested as possible. But Grandmere ignored my bad attitude. She just sat back in her chair, her head slightly tilted, and I could tell by the look into her eyes she had gone somewhere far away.